Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our shoes and stepping into the rain-dappled alleys of old Hanoi. Picture this, warm mist rising from cobbled streets, wooden shutters creaking open to reveal small glowing rooms, and somewhere nearby, the sharp hiss of water hitting a hot clay kettle. A drizzle taps gently on the tiled rooftops above you. You tug your cloak a little tighter. Yes, tonight it's raining in 18th century Vietnam, and you've got a tea appointment to keep. You duck under a low-hanging awning where an elderly vendor gestures you inside. There's no sign, just a chipped red lantern, swinging lazily. A bench of polished bamboo, a warped wooden table, and the sharp scent of dried lotus seeds greet you. The tea's not ready yet, of course it's not. You're early, you're foreign, and clearly, you don't yet know that the best tea is worth being late for. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're waiting for your tea, why not drop your location and local time in the comments below? I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a seat. The woman at the far end of the room, grandmotherly, eyes like polished river stones, sets a pot over the coals. You won't drink that batch. That one's for scenting the space. The real tea, the kind worthy of a quiet afternoon storm, takes time. And rainwater. Yes, you heard that right. Here in 18th century Hanoi, real tea, tea with soul, tea for good conversation and even better napping, is made with collected rainwater. Not just any rain, either. It has to be the kind that falls gently after 3 dry days, and it must be caught on rooftops washed clean by the first drizzle. Old tiles are best, porous enough to filter, curved enough to sing when the drops hit them. There's something oddly meditative about it, the act of waiting for the right kind of rain. Historians still argue whether this was more aesthetic ritual or practical water sourcing. Likely both. Vietnam's urban water wasn't always the clearest, and rain, when fresh and sweet, brought a clarity that city wells lacked. But make no mistake, this wasn't just practicality. It was poetry. The tea's taste, they said, could shift depending on whether the rain fell in morning or dusk. Whether it came with wind or silence. Whether the birds had chirped before the downpour. You glance toward the back wall, where old ceramic jars line up like sleepy monks. That one, pale blue, fish painted in lazy brush strokes, holds rainwater from a storm last month. It's still mellowing, aging under banana leaf caps. You think that sounds made up? Maybe. But the woman beside you murmurs something about, "Bao Troi see you, old sky." She says the tea remembers. Now, as the steam starts to curl upward, you notice something curious. There's no sugar here, no lemon, no clunky infuser balls. Instead, a single thread of pandan leaf floats in the cup. You lean in. It smells like vanilla's quieter cousin. Floral, grassy, just shy of sweet. A soft kind of fragrance, perfect for a rainy day when your brain's only half awake. She pours. Not into a mug, mind you, into a teacup no bigger than your thumb. Porcelain, eggshell thin, with the faint outline of a dragon wrapped around its belly. You try to pick it up like you would back home. Wrong again. The cup's cradled with 2 hands, no pinky flare. And you sip, not slurp. Slurping's for soup. Or arguments. There's an older man by the doorway, snoozing, or meditating, or maybe both. He hasn't moved in 20 minutes. The kettle hisses again. Another guest arrives, drenched from the walk, shaking water off a conical hat. Nobody speaks right away. Here, silence is part of the conversation. That's the thing people forget. Vietnamese tea culture wasn't about ceremony in the Japanese sense, or power rituals like in Qing dynasty courts. It was slower. Earthier. Less choreographed. And very, very tied to weather. Rain meant people lingered. Rain meant you weren't farming. Rain gave you an excuse to sit still, and in that stillness, tea found its perfect moment. You feel yourself slipping into that rhythm. A warm cup. The light tapping of water outside. The hiss and bubble of the clay kettle over coals. No phones, no clocks. Just the soft weight of humid air and the whisper of steam on porcelain. Now, for the first fun tidbit of the night, some tea houses, particularly those near temples, once played tea divination games. After the first steep, guests would swirl the leaves left behind, flip their cups, and try to read fortunes from the soggy patterns. A drip down one side meant travel. A spiraled leaf. Romantic entanglements. A guest who asked what it meant was teased mercilessly. If you had to ask, it probably meant you were dull. But tonight, no fortunes. Just warmth. Just rain. Just you, a cup, and the ghost of a city that still remembers how to sit still. The rain doesn't let up. You're still seated on that bamboo bench, your teacup cooling in your hands as the street beyond turns to ribbons of gray and silver. A woman walks past with an oil paper umbrella. Her sandals splash softly through the puddles. Somewhere nearby, a rooster, confused, perhaps, lets out a sleepy crow, as if mistaking this dusky downpour for dawn. Inside the tea house, the fire crackles beneath the clay kettle. The old woman who runs the place is still busy with her ritual. You've had your first cup, but now she's preparing something more serious. She's reaching for a tall ceramic jug behind the folding screen, a vessel of collected rainwater, sealed with wax and tied with red silk thread. Rainwater aged like wine. You learn something: not all rainwater is created equal. Tea masters in historical Vietnam had an unspoken hierarchy of sky-sourced water. Fresh storm rain from a high mountain village. Ideal. Rain collected during the monsoon's fifth week, just before the dragonflies disappear. Rare and much coveted. The worst water, they agreed, came from flat-roofed buildings with gossiping neighbors nearby. Too much drama in the air, someone once joked. It made the tea bitter. You chuckle softly. Then wonder, were they kidding? Historians still argue whether these water rituals were driven by chemistry or sheer romance. It's true that different minerals in the air can affect the pH of rain. But many of these distinctions seem more poetic than scientific. Still, nobody ever questioned the masters, least of all the ones who'd been boiling tea since before your grandmother's grandmother was born. The water is ladled gently into the kettle. There's no harsh pour here. Just the rhythmic scoop of bamboo against ceramic. The fire flares orange. You can feel the warmth press against your shins. And then comes the real art, the boil. Boiling rainwater for tea isn't about getting it hot, it's about getting it just right. You watch as she waits, eyes never leaving the kettle. No thermometer. Just sound. She's listening for what the old masters called the shrimp bubble stage. That's when the water starts to release tiny spirals of steam, no loud bubbling, no rolling boil. If the bubbles look like shrimp eyes and sound like whispers, it's ready. Go past that, and the tea turns flat. Worse, disrespectful. You remember the phrase carved into the beam above the hearth, Noak soi kong voi. Literally, don't rush boiling water. More loosely, patience makes the tea sweet. You begin to understand why these rainy day ceremonies weren't built for modern schedules. Nothing here is fast. But then again, you're not in a hurry. Next, the tea leaves. They come from a lacquered box tucked behind the stove, wrapped in silk, stored with a dried tangerine peel to balance the humidity. You catch a glimpse, small, wiry strands of green, twisted like old handwriting. This is tra sen, lotus tea. Not flavored, infused. The blossoms are harvested before dawn, when they're still dewy and closed. The tea leaves are folded into their petals and left overnight to absorb the floral aroma. It's subtle, shy, like a memory instead of a taste. The old woman opens the pot, no fanfare. Just a humble earthenware thing with chips around the rim, and adds the leaves with a single nod. She doesn't stir. Doesn't even look inside. She simply closes the lid and sets the pot near the flame. Not on it. Near it. Warm, not boiled. Tea, she once explained to a boy across the room, is like conversation. Push it too hard, and it leaves. You sit with that thought a while. Across the room, someone brings out a tiny wind chime. Just 5 hollow bamboo tubes, strung with string. It dings softly in the draft. The entire tea house begins to smell like wet clay, pandan, and thyme. Here's a lesser-known tidbit: in rural villages of the Red River Delta, some elders kept rain calendars, just for tea. They'd jot down which days yielded the smoothest brews, which clouds felt too heavy, and when frogs croaked before sunset, believed to be a sign of acidic skies. A monk in Bac Ninh even claimed to read tea quality in the reflections of puddles. Scholars roll their eyes at that one, but you have to admit, it sounds convincing on a sleepy night like this. When the tea is finally poured again, you notice the sound. It's quiet. Controlled. There's no glugging. No splashes. Just a slow, continuous stream, as if gravity is being extra polite. Your cup is warmer now. The taste is different. Still floral, but deeper. The lotus has settled. You take a longer sip. Then, of course, someone spills theirs. A young man, nervously reaching for his saucer, tips the cup with his sleeve. It rolls. It splashes. There's a collective pause. And then everyone smiles. Because spilling tea on a rainy day. It's a blessing. It means you'll be invited back. The old woman simply nods, refills his cup, and dabs the table with a cloth that looks older than most dynasties. That's the charm of these forgotten ceremonies. They weren't stiff or overly formal. They weren't about impressing guests with precise movements or rare china. They were about the slow dance between rain, warmth, and time. Between strangers becoming friends. Between you, the steam, and a sky you never thought to drink. And tonight, you're part of that dance. You don't realize how long you've been here until the rain deepens. It's a quiet shift, almost imperceptible. The kind of change only noticed by people doing absolutely nothing, people like you now. The drizzle thickens to a patient curtain, the world beyond the tea house blurring into a watery hush. The lamp hanging above your head glows warmer against the gray. It's as if the entire street has been pulled underwater. And this, your host seems to believe, is the exact moment to talk about teacups. She brings out a wooden tray. On it, 6 cups, each different. One shaped like a thimble. One with scalloped edges like flower petals. Another as wide as a seashell. None match, and yet each has a deliberate imperfection. A crooked lip. A crack repaired in gold. A thumbprint pressed just above the base. She doesn't explain. She doesn't have to. In Vietnam, especially among older tea masters, teacups were never about symmetry or status. They were meant to reflect personality. A tea drinker's choice of cup wasn't arbitrary, it was intimate. The rounder the cup, the softer the temperament. A taller one? The sign of someone who liked to debate. Slanted rims? You guessed it, people with odd sleeping habits. You, naturally, are handed the quietest cup on the tray. Pale blue. Speckled. A single pine branch painted on the inside, so faint it's barely there. You get the sense she's chosen for you. It's comforting and unnerving at the same time. A tiny porcelain judgment, served warm. Now here's a mainstream historical fact to sip on: Vietnamese tea culture predates Chinese rule, but during the millennium-long period of Chinese imperial influence, from roughly 111 BC to 938 AD, ceramics from Vietnam began to take on regional flavors of the Tang and later Song dynasties. Yet even as imported porcelain grew popular, rural artisans stuck with their gritty, wood-fired pots and cups. The result? A culture where refined and rustic coexisted side by side, and where even something as small as a teacup could become a tiny rebellion. You swirl your tea, thinking about that. The man sitting across from you leans forward. He's wearing the traditional brown robe of a craftsman, his fingernails stained from ink or lacquer. He's explaining, half to you, half to no one in particular, that he once saw a cup so thin it let the morning sun through its base, but so tough it survived a fall down stone stairs. He believes, earnestly, that the cup was blessed. Or cursed. Or both. You nod politely. It feels rude to question that sort of logic in this weather. The fringe tidbit of this section comes now, quietly. Some Vietnamese tea masters believed that a talkative cup, one that made a light whistling noise when filled, meant that its previous owner had unfinished business. Cups, they said, could carry moods. A melancholy vessel might turn your tea bitter. A broken one, improperly repaired, might invite rain that never stopped. One particularly unlucky poet was said to have used the same cracked cup for a month and ended up losing all three of his lovers, a pig, and his rice harvest. You suppress a smile. Tea might soothe, but its legends. Unapologetically dramatic. And then there's how you hold the cup. One hand. Efficient, but dismissive. Two hands. Respectful. 3 fingers and a half smile. Apparently, you're trying to flirt. Holding the saucer under the cup is polite, unless you're gripping it too tightly. That implies fear. Or cold. Or both. Either way, the tea house notices. You shift slightly in your seat. Your host chuckles, eyes crinkling. She places a hand on your cup and gently rotates it, so the painted pine faces you directly. There. Now you're properly aligned. With what, exactly, you're not sure, but it feels better already. You start to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. It's not just tea. It's not just the rain. It's how people read into objects, gestures, pauses. This whole setting is its own kind of language. One that doesn't mind being misunderstood, as long as you keep sipping. Historians still argue whether this elaborate system of cup symbolism was truly widespread or mostly the affectation of scholarly circles in cities like Hue and Hanoi. Some suggest it was a kind of philosophical parlor game, invented to pass time and impress guests. Others insist it ran deeper, an unspoken code of social belonging, especially among older generations. Either way, it makes you feel more awake. Or maybe more aware. You're drawn now to the shelf behind the teahouse matriarch. Lined with more cups, clearly unused, glazed in mossy greens, sandy whites, midnight blues. She sees your gaze. She nods. Those, she tells you softly, are cups for people who don't visit anymore. Travelers. Teachers. One man who moved south and promised to return when the rain stopped. That was 10 years ago. And she hasn't touched his cup since. The rain lingers, and so do you. Outside, the sky has settled into a soft, endless gray, the kind that doesn't mean to storm, it just wants to keep everything damp and slow. Inside, your second pot of tea is nearly gone, and your host disappears briefly behind a bamboo curtain. When she returns, it's with a lacquered tray and a knowing smile. Snacks. But not just any snacks. These are mua chiu snacks, afternoon rain delicacies, small comforts designed for days when travel stops, work pauses, and all that's left to do is listen to the downpour and chew something gentle. She sets the tray down with the reverence of a ceremonial offering. First up, candied ginger. Thin, irregular slices, pale gold and dusted with sugar. You bite in, and it's both warm and sharp, a polite slap to the senses. It's said to wake the tongue after too much tea. Then come mung bean cakes, square and soft, like edible pillows. They crumble into powdery sweetness between your teeth, melting into a buttery whisper of flavor. These were called bon dao zan, and in northern Vietnam's cooler seasons, they were as common as tea itself. In some households, they were even used as quiet status symbols. The lighter the color and the finer the texture, the higher the family's reputation. Or at least, that's what the neighbors whispered. And let's be honest, neighbors always whisper. There's a dish of dried lotus seeds, faintly sweet and surprisingly chewy. And beside it, tiny skewers of roasted banana slices, caramelized until their edges darken and curl like old paper. Everything is small. Everything asks to be eaten slowly. Historians still argue whether these specific pairings evolved organically or were carefully designed over generations. Some say they were curated for flavor balance, others for spiritual harmony. A modern food historian once suggested that Vietnamese rainy day snack culture was accidental mindfulness, and honestly, you can't disagree. There's something about eating things this soft while thunder hums faintly in the background that makes your brain feel quiet. And here's your fringe fact: in the countryside, it wasn't uncommon for families to host in Vat Mua, impromptu rainy snack parties. Guests would arrive uninvited, usually barefoot, carrying small bundles of candied tamarind or rice crackers wrapped in banana leaf. They'd settle around the stove, listen to old stories, and snack until someone fell asleep or the rain stopped, whichever came first. No one expected conversation. The snacks were the conversation. Your host gestures to the window. The street's puddles now hold full reflections, trees, rooftops, a stray chicken wandering beneath a tilted awning. She brings out a final treat, chalam. It looks unassuming, a grayish square, dusted in rice flour. But when you bite in, it's all warm ginger and roasted peanuts, sweetened with glutinous rice syrup. Chewy. Dense. Slightly smoky. It sticks to your molars in a way that feels both nostalgic and mildly defiant. The kind of treat your grandmother might warn you not to eat before bed, then sneak you 2 extra pieces anyway. And it has history. Originally a peasant snack from the northern plains, chalam became popular with traveling scholars in the 18th and 19th centuries. Light, filling, and inexpensive, it was the energy bar of the Confucian exam circuit. There's even an old proverb about it: mot ming chalam, mot don duong xe. One bite of chalam, one long road ahead. Though tonight, there's no journey. Just you, the chew, and the slow roll of thunder across the lake. You ask your host, quietly, how many of these snacks she makes herself. All of them, she says, a little proud, a little tired. Except the rice crackers. My sister's better at those. And just like that, you get a glimpse of the wider network these rainy day rituals once relied on: sisters, cousins, apprentices, delivery boys with arms full of sugarcane. None of this was ever done alone. Tea may seem like a solitary drink, but in Vietnam, it's communal. Even the silence is shared. Now, you lean back slightly, belly warm, eyelids heavier than you expected. The snacks weren't large, but they carried weight, of memory, of tradition, of glutinous rice. Your fingers trace the edge of your teacup as your thoughts begin to drift. The woman beside you unwraps a final treat from a palm leaf. Inside, a sticky cube of sweet rice filled with crushed black sesame. It's barely sweet. More fragrant than flavorful. You take a bite, and it tastes like yesterday, whatever that means. And here's a final sensory detail you didn't expect: the sound of chewing is oddly satisfying in this space. It blends with the rain. Enhances it. There's something peaceful about people eating without words. Just soft crunches, gentle swallows, and the occasional sigh of contentment. You're not the only one feeling drowsy now. The man by the door has slumped fully against the post, chin to chest. A teenager in the corner is twirling her teacup with lazy loops. Even the rooster, bless him, has given up trying to make sense of the weather. You finish the last bite of your sticky rice treat. The sweetness lingers just long enough to make you nostalgic for a moment that hasn't even ended yet. And still, the rain falls. Your cup is empty again. You don't remember finishing it, but that's how it works here. Tea disappears slowly, in tiny sips between thoughts, between listening to the rain, between watching a thin trail of steam coil upward like incense from a temple altar. Your host leans over to refill your cup, but this time, it's not just for you. A few guests have entered quietly, neighbors, you assume. One wears a conical hat flecked with rainwater and a tunic that looks like it was once navy blue. They nod in your direction without speaking, as if acknowledging a fellow traveler in this unspoken ritual. The woman clears a small space in the corner. Someone carefully unrolls a reed mat. You watch with quiet curiosity as they begin to set up what can only be described as a miniature shrine. A photo of an elderly man, yellowed with time. A cup of steaming tea. A dish of glutinous rice balls dusted with coconut. And, curiously, a pair of ivory chopsticks crossed carefully beside a half-peeled pomelo. This isn't just snacking now. This is a tea ceremony for the dead. It's more common than you'd think, especially on rainy days. In Vietnam, rain is often associated with visiting ancestors. The rain makes the world softer, quieter, closer to the spirit realm, or so the saying goes. People believe their ancestors can hear better when the world is muted. And tea, with its warm and gentle scent, is the perfect calling card. Your host lights a single joss stick. Its tip glows red for a moment before fading into a faint curl of smoke. The tea is poured, slowly, evenly, into a second cup, and set on the altar beside the rice balls. It won't be touched. That cup is for someone who isn't here. Or rather, who is here, just not in a way your eyes can catch. The main ceremony isn't long. A brief bow. A murmur of thanks. A quiet minute of silence that stretches into two. No one cries. No one even blinks more than usual. It's simply another way to remember, through scent, through steam, through snacks. Historians still argue whether these domestic ancestor tea offerings were rooted in formal Confucian rituals or if they developed from older, pre-Sinitic animist traditions that predated Chinese influence. Probably both. But either way, they endure. You'll find them today on apartment balconies in Hanoi, or next to cash registers in corner stores. A cup of tea for the departed, refreshed daily. No fanfare, no announcement. Just quiet continuity. You take another sip and realize, you're not just participating anymore. You're part of the ceremony. A small girl toddles into the tea house from under someone's cloak. She's carrying something, a tightly folded oilcloth bundle. The host unwraps it with care. Inside is a worn piece of paper and what looks like a seating chart. Yes. You heard right. Even ghosts get assigned seating. In more elaborate ceremonies, especially among older families, ancestors aren't just honored, they're hosted. Each spirit has their place, parents in front, grandparents higher up, troublemaking uncles strategically placed further away so they don't interrupt. Tea is poured in order of seniority, and snacks are offered based on preference. One famously cranky ancestor in a nearby village was said to cause electrical outages if his rice crackers were served cold. You sip again, watching the proceedings unfold like theater played at quarter speed. And here's a tidbit for your sleepy brain to chew on: in some coastal communities, tea ceremonies for the dead would include whispering weather reports. The idea? Spirits of fishermen needed to know if the tides had changed. A cup of tea, a bowl of rice, and a soft-voiced weather update, more hospitality than haunting. Your host begins to hum. It's not a song you know, but the sound carries something tender. A lullaby, maybe. Or a prayer disguised as a melody. The guests murmur softly, their voices low and round like stones in a riverbed. Even without understanding the words, you feel their purpose. This isn't grief. It's gratitude. And somehow, it's not eerie. It's comfortable. Like a blanket that smells like someone you love. Outside, the rain eases into a gentler rhythm, almost as if it's listening too. You glance down at your cup, half full again. The steam curls like a question mark. You've heard of tea as social glue, tea as medicine, tea as art, but tea as afterlife correspondence. That's new. And yet, it feels completely right. A final fringe note for this section: some old superstitions claim that if you fall asleep in a tea house during a ceremony like this, your spirit may briefly drift into the world of the ancestors, just for a peek. Not in a scary way. Just a polite drop-in. Like borrowing a book from a library you didn't know existed, one monk wrote in 1794. But the book knows your name. You set your cup down slowly. You're not sleepy. Not yet. But you could be. The tea is darker now. You hadn't noticed the shift at first, but your cup has taken on a deeper color, amber, like honey left too long in a sunbeam. It's the third steep, your host murmurs, and with it comes strength. The flavor becomes bolder, the aroma heavier, like a lotus blooming past its prime. This is when the tea starts to show its age, and its patience. The guests linger, as if waiting for something not yet spoken. You sit straighter, more attuned now to the rhythm of the room. The rain outside has slowed to a mist. You can hear it brushing the leaves of a guava tree just beyond the window. The city is hushed, soaked, listening. This is the hour when stories arrive. Your host sets aside the tray and begins to speak, not in a performer's voice, but in that warm, indirect way storytellers always seem to have when they're not quite sure where the story ends. She speaks of Tra Dao, the way of tea, but not the Japanese version. This is a distinctly Vietnamese path. Less strict, more winding. Less about form, more about flow. She tells of the Nguyen scholar who refused imperial titles because the palace tea tasted like boiled coins. Of the hilltop farmers in Tai Nguyen province who claimed their tea was blessed by the morning fog itself. And of a reclusive monk who drank tea only after copying a single page of scripture by hand each day. He believed the words settled in better that way. You sip your tea. It's somehow warmer now, as if responding to the stories. Here's a mainstream historical nugget: during the Liu dynasty, 1428 to 1789, scholarly tea gatherings became common in Hanoi and Hue. These were not parties, but Dan Tra, tea conversations. They followed a loose structure: the tea master brewed the first cup, guests responded with short poems or quotations, and between sips, topics ranged from Confucian ethics to the price of fish paste. It was considered impolite to speak too quickly, or too cleverly. Modesty was more prized than brilliance. There's something soothing about that. A culture where listening was as important as speaking. Where a pause between phrases wasn't awkward but elegant. Try that at your next office meeting and see how far you get. The host leans over and adds another log to the fire. Sparks pop. A cat, when did a cat get here, stretches beneath the bench and settles into a purring loaf. You notice someone is sketching in a cloth-bound notebook across the room. Not words, just outlines. Teacups, roof tiles, maybe your face. She turns the story again. Now it's about a tea master who once fell in love with the rain itself. Not a woman, not a man, just the act of rainfall. He swore the taste of rainwater changed depending on whether he was happy or sad. He recorded dozens of blends, naming them after feelings. Melancholy lotus. Loneliness oolong. Joyful ginger storm. No one knows what became of him. But supposedly, his descendants still name their teas after weather. And here's your fringe fact for this section: in certain tea circles, the fourth steep, rarely served to guests, was believed to be the mirror cup. Not because it showed your reflection, but because it reflected your spirit. If the tea turned cloudy, it meant you were hiding something. If it remained clear, peace of mind. You peek into your third cup. Still translucent. You're not ready for the fourth. Yet. Historians still debate whether these metaphorical associations with steeping stages were literal beliefs or poetic games. Likely both. The Vietnamese language, after all, is famously rich in metaphor. One old saying goes, Wong tra kong chi bang ming ma bang long. Tea is not drunk with the mouth, but with the heart. You sip again. The flavor has mellowed now, still floral, but quieter. Like the final bars of a song you've almost forgotten. You close your eyes for a moment. Just long enough to see a memory that isn't yours, a narrow tea field at dawn, dew brushing against someone's bare ankles, a kettle clutched in calloused hands. You don't know why it's there, but the image feels true. When you open your eyes, your host is telling another story, this time about a traveling musician who refused to play until he'd had a full pot of tea and at least one roasted peanut. No peanut, no song. Local legend says a jealous noble once tried to bribe his server to forget the peanuts. The musician sat in silence for 4 hours, eyes closed, listening to the rain, and then left without playing a single note. He returned a month later, handed the noble a single roasted peanut, and left again. No explanation. The room chuckles quietly. Even the rain seems to approve. There's something about these slow stories, these remembered sips, that start to soften the edges of time. You're not sure how long you've been here. An hour? 2. 10 years? You wouldn't be surprised if this teahouse existed outside of time entirely, an endless loop of brewing, sipping, and waiting for weather. And still, your tea is warm. Now you're deep in it, the kind of tea-slowed moment where thoughts start to blend together like colors in a puddle. Your host places a small cloth bundle beside your cup. She unties it carefully, revealing what looks like a collection of tea tools, a slim bamboo scoop, a tiny pick carved from horn, and a pair of delicate wooden tongs shaped like herons. Not tools in the mechanical sense, but ritual objects, each with its own story, its own touch of mythology. This one, she says, lifting the scoop, was made from bamboo that only grows after the third full moon of the lunar year. A stretch? Maybe. But you're not here to fact-check bamboo. She uses the pick to stir the leaves inside the pot, just slightly, just enough to make the next steep more curious than the last. Tea, it turns out, is like a conversation with someone who's shy at first, but opens up once they realize you're listening. And this steep, your fourth now, is mellow and strange. Slightly earthy. Like drinking rain that remembers dust. Now here's your historical anchor. Tea implements in Vietnam are often overshadowed by their more famous Chinese or Japanese counterparts, but they carry a quiet elegance of their own. During the Tran dynasty, 1225 to 1400, Vietnamese scholars began crafting their own tea utensils from local materials, rosewood, buffalo horn, and ceramics glazed in thick, smoky ash. They didn't chase refinement. They sought Hu Xa Tu Nin Hung, natural fragrance needs no perfume. You sip again. The tea's cooler now, and you're grateful. Warmth gives way to gentleness. And just then, a low rumble rolls across the room. Not thunder. A stomach. A small boy in the corner clutches his belly and tries to look innocent. The host smiles and disappears behind the stove curtain. Soon, she returns with a single bowl of steaming porridge. Now this is a rainy day specialty, chow gao lut, red rice porridge, slow cooked until the grains are soft but still hold their shape. A drizzle of sesame oil on top. A single pickled plum in the center like a sleepy volcano. She spoons it out wordlessly, and before long, you're handed your own bowl. It's subtle food, humble, earthy. The kind of thing that doesn't demand attention but gets it anyway. The porridge coats your tongue, warms your belly, and lulls your brain like a lullaby in edible form. This leads to a lesser-known cultural quirk. In rural tea houses like this one, porridge wasn't always part of the menu, but when it rained long enough, it would appear. Rain meant wet fields, delayed work, fewer customers. It also meant time to soak the rice longer, to let the sesame seeds roast slower. Some tea houses became known for their storm porridge, with secret touches passed down only to the most trusted apprentice. And then there's the story of the porridge poet. A wandering scholar named Han, sometime in the early 1800s, traveled from village to village, offering handwritten verses in exchange for bowls of porridge and hot tea. He never asked for money. Only food served warm. He once wrote, "The longer the rain, the softer the rice. The softer the rice, the kinder the world." No one knows where he ended up. Some say he starved in a monastery. Others claim he opened a tea stall on a misty hill and serves tea to birds now. Historians still argue whether he was real or a folk invention, stitched together from a dozen similar stories. But everyone agrees on one thing: the porridge tasted better when he was around. Your host offers you a boiled peanut from her apron pocket. Not from a bowl, from the pocket. You accept it without question. It's warm, soft, and just salty enough to remind you you're still awake. And now, something curious, she points to a jar on the windowsill. Inside is rainwater, again, but this batch has flowers in it. Pale yellow blossoms. Chamomile? No. You lean closer. Hoa Sua. Milk flower. A Hanoi staple, this heavily scented bloom is both beloved and divisive. Some find it romantic. Others say it smells like damp laundry. But in rainwater, it infuses the air with something sleepy, like old paper dipped in perfume. Your fringe fact: some believe that tea brewed with Hoa Sua rainwater helped ease nightmares. Especially those caused by ancestral dreams. One elderly woman swore that ever since switching to milk flower tea, her great-grandfather had stopped showing up to complain about modern fashion. You laugh softly into your cup. The stories have slowed now. So has the tea. The boy in the corner is dozing against his mother's sleeve. The bowl of porridge has long since emptied. Outside, the rain returns in fine threads. And you, too, are unraveling, softly, sweetly, like steam leaving a pot that no one remembers starting. The fire has burned low now. What little light remains flickers gold across the teahouse walls, catching on lacquered wood and polished stone. Outside, the rain's tempo has changed once more, quieter, yes, but steady, persistent, like a lullaby that never quite ends. A few drops find their way through the roof tiles, falling with soft plinks into a basin by the door. Each sound feels intentional, like punctuation in a story that's still unfolding. Your host returns with another pot, not one you've seen before. It's older, clearly, its surface glazed in a cloudy celadon that seems to hold the memory of every storm it's brewed through. She sets it down gently, like a trusted old friend who still has something to say. This one, she tells you, is from Bat Trang. You've heard of Bat Trang. A small village near Hanoi, famous for its ceramics since the 14th century. But you didn't expect to hold one of its teapots in your own hands, especially not while the room smells faintly of roasted rice and forgotten flowers. She pours, and the tea flows dark and slow. It smells of smoke and cinnamon, with a whisper of something green beneath. You sip, and the taste is sturdy. Like old wood left out in the sun. It's not trying to impress you. It's just there. And here's your mainstream fact for this evening: Bat Trang ceramics became essential to Vietnamese tea culture by the 15th century. The clay, mined from the banks of the Red River, was said to be uniquely absorbent, which allowed pots to remember the teas they brewed. Over time, the pots seasoned themselves, like cast iron, but for tea. True tea connoisseurs would never wash a seasoned pot with soap. Only with water. Only with care. Your host confirms this with a nod. This one has brewed only mountain teas, she says. For 30 years. You resist the urge to apologize to the pot for not being worthy. But the tea forgives you anyway. Now comes one of the more peculiar traditions. She pulls out a fan, not for cooling, but for waving at the teapot. A few slow passes through the air, clockwise, then counterclockwise. A ritual? A superstition? She explains, almost shyly, that it's an old habit from her grandfather. He said the teapot liked to feel the air move, especially before the fifth steep. And yes, you've reached the fifth steep. Fringe fact, in some Vietnamese tea circles, the fifth steep was called the ghost pour. Not because it summoned spirits, but because it revealed them. A strong cup on the fifth pour meant your intentions were clear. A weak one. Something was unsettled, within you, or the space. Some even said that if your fifth cup tasted like metal, you needed to make peace with someone. Quickly. You taste yours. It's floral. Grassy. Honest. You're probably fine. Now the host dims the lamp by the window, and for the first time, the room shifts from cozy to sacred. Shadows lean in. The rain, persistent as ever, sings its same quiet refrain. You begin to realize why these ceremonies were often held at night. Night tea, or tra dem, wasn't just about taste. It was about memory. Reflection. And often, confession. The man across the room, yes, he's still here, clears his throat. Slowly, deliberately, he speaks of a tea house he once visited in Hoi An, where the water was boiled with dried orange peel, and guests wrote their regrets on slips of silk paper, tied them to steam-warmed stones, and left them by the riverbank. By morning, the silk would be gone. The regrets, one hoped, with them. Your host nods, unsurprised. She's heard many versions of that story. One time, she says, a guest left a slip of paper that simply read, "Sorry I never came back." Historians still argue whether these late-night rituals evolved from Buddhist midnight meditations or were a folk response to insomnia and unspoken grief. Whatever their origin, they endure, quiet moments in quiet rooms, where the tea listens longer than most people do. Now you're handed something new, a tea stone. It's smooth, gray, the size of a small plum. Your host invites you to warm it in your hands. Not for luck. Not for ceremony. Just for grounding. The heat of your palm seeps into the stone, and for a strange, comforting moment, you feel like it's breathing with you. There's something deeply human about that. And here, nestled in all this slow ritual, is your fringe tidbit. Some believe tea stones could absorb dreams. If placed beside a sleeper's pillow, they'd carry fragments of dreams into the next day's steep. Some families pass down dream stones, said to hold generations of unspoken thoughts. A few are still kept in museums, though curators will tell you they're just polished river rocks. You lean back, the stone still in your hand, your cup empty once again. No one rushes to refill it. Not yet. This is the pause. The space between steeps. The long inhale before another sip. And outside, the rain has shifted again, lighter now, gentler. As if it, too, is growing sleepy. The night deepens, and so does your quiet contemplation. The rain outside has softened to a mist that clings gently to the windows. Your hands cradle the cool tea stone, now warm, a comforting weight that seems to anchor you in the moment. The air is thick with the mingled scents of wet earth, roasted rice, and lingering tea leaves. It's a fragrance that feels like home, even if you've never been here before. Your host quietly moves around the room, setting down a small ceramic plate with a delicate stack of snacks. These are not just any snacks, they are the rainy day treats of old Hanoi, each bite a subtle symphony of texture and flavor designed to complement the tea's evolving notes. First comes the Bon Dao Zan, soft mung bean cakes dusted with powdered sugar, their sweetness restrained and delicate, melting gently on your tongue. Next are crisp hat durang, roasted chestnuts, their warmth radiating through your fingers as you peel back the brittle shells. And finally, a small handful of kio masung, sticky sesame candy with hints of honey and caramelized malt, chewy enough to keep you occupied but not so much that it distracts from the tea. The combination is simple, humble, but perfect in its balance. The sweet and savory dance around the tea's bitterness, coaxing out new layers, new memories. Historically, these snacks were staples of Vietnamese tea culture, especially during the wet season when outdoor work slowed and families gathered indoors. Street vendors in the 19th century specialized in such treats, often tailoring recipes to match local tea preferences. The tradition of pairing tea with snacks wasn't merely for flavor, it was a social glue, a way to slow down and savor the company of others. Your host smiles softly, noting how your attention has shifted from the tea to the snacks, a gentle reminder that tea culture isn't just about drinking but about presence. Here's a quirky detail: in some provinces, especially in the north, people believed that sharing sesame candy during rainstorms could keep bad spirits at bay. Sesame, with its earthy aroma and sticky texture, was thought to trap misfortune, while honey's sweetness invited good luck. So, every bite was both a treat and a small charm. There's an unspoken debate among scholars about how much these snack rituals influenced social cohesion in Vietnamese villages. Some argue the practices were primarily economic, street vendors boosting sales during off-peak seasons, while others see them as cultural bedrocks, subtle rituals that kept communities resilient through wet months. You nibble on a chestnut, savoring the warmth. Your eyes wander to the worn pages of an ancient tea manual resting on a side table, handwritten in delicate calligraphy, its edges frayed by countless hands. It describes the art of pairing tea with seasonal foods, noting that rainy days called for softer, more comforting accompaniments. The tea steeps again, your sixth now, lighter, more delicate. The taste is almost floral, like a whisper of spring, and it reminds you of the slow turning of the seasons, of cycles and patience. As the tea lulls you deeper into the moment, you realize how much this slow ritual has shifted your pace. The rush of modern life feels distant, almost like a bad dream you can't quite recall. Your host's voice breaks the silence, sharing a story about a village elder who once declared that the perfect tea snack was not about flavor, but about texture, the way it crunched, melted, or stretched. Because, she said, if the snack doesn't make you notice the tea more, then what's the point? You chuckle softly to yourself, imagining a tea party where everyone competes for the crunchiest bite. Historians still ponder whether these texture-focused preferences were genuinely widespread or simply the musings of a few particular connoisseurs. Either way, it adds a charming layer to the story of Vietnamese tea culture. The rain outside has slowed to a whisper now, a soft backdrop to your thoughts. And you, too, are beginning to drift, slowly, gently, towards sleep. The rain outside has settled into a quiet hum, like a gentle chorus singing just for you. Inside the tea house, the air feels even softer, as if it's wrapped in layers of moss and memory. Your host moves with a graceful ease, filling your cup once again. This steep, your seventh, is brewed from leaves picked high in the northern mountains, where clouds kiss the earth and the sun barely touches the soil. The taste is different now, subtler, with hints of wild herbs and a faint sweetness that lingers at the edges of your tongue. You close your eyes briefly and imagine the tea leaves swaying in a misty forest, droplets of rain clinging to their edges like tiny jewels. Here's your anchor fact: northern Vietnamese tea plantations have been known since the 17th century for producing what was called Tra Suoi Mei, or cloud stream tea, prized for its delicate flavor and rarity. These teas were often reserved for local nobility or gifted during important ceremonies. But it's not just the tea itself that carries history, it's the stories woven into each cup. Your host begins to recount a tale passed down through generations. It's about a monk who lived in the mountains, known for his ability to find the perfect moment to pick tea leaves. Legend says he could listen to the forest and know exactly when the rain had softened the leaves just enough to make the best brew. This monk's routine was simple yet profound. Before dawn, he would climb the steep paths to the tea bushes, his footsteps muffled by the mist. He believed the leaves absorbed the spirit of the rain, and only by respecting nature's rhythm could the tea reveal its true essence. The monk's story isn't just folklore, there's historical evidence that Buddhist monks played a crucial role in developing tea cultivation techniques in Vietnam, especially in remote mountain areas. Their deep connection to nature and meditation practices influenced the way tea was grown, harvested, and appreciated. Now for the quirky tidbit: some say that monks would whisper prayers to the tea plants, asking them to grant peaceful sleep to those who drank their leaves. Whether this was spiritual practice or clever marketing is up for debate. Speaking of debate, historians still argue whether the ritualistic aspects of tea picking in these mountain monasteries were primarily religious or practical. Some believe the prayers helped focus the monks' minds during labor, others think they were intended to imbue the tea with mystical properties. Your host pours you a tiny cup of the freshest steep, inviting you to savor it slowly. As the warm liquid slides down, you feel a calm settle over your chest. To accompany the tea, she offers a small plate of banh nep, sticky rice cakes wrapped in banana leaves, filled with sweet mung bean paste. The aroma is comforting and familiar, like a soft hug from a rainy afternoon. These cakes are more than just snacks. They are symbols of hospitality and family gatherings, often made during festivals or rainy days when work paused and stories flowed freely. You notice the careful folds of the banana leaves, each crease deliberate. It's a quiet art form, a way of honoring the ingredients and the hands that prepared them. Your host shares that in some villages, children would learn to make these cakes from their grandmothers, mastering the technique through patience and repetition. It was a rite of passage, a lesson in respect for tradition. As you nibble on the sticky cake, your thoughts drift back to the rain. It's no longer just a weather pattern, it's a rhythm that shapes the entire experience of tea, food, and storytelling. The rain teaches patience, attentiveness, and the value of slow moments. You sip the last of your tea and feel the room's warmth wrap around you like a soft blanket. The night moves on, quiet and deep, inviting you further into rest. The rain's steady rhythm now feels like a heartbeat, soft, regular, and reassuring. In the corner of the tea house, a faint glow from a flickering candle adds a tender warmth to the room. Your hands hold the cup, still warm from the last pour, and you watch the steam rise in delicate spirals, curling upward like smoke from an ancient incense stick. Your host moves quietly to a low shelf, retrieving a small wooden box. Inside, nestled among layers of soft fabric, are a collection of tea tools. You recognize some, a bamboo scoop, a tiny whisk, but others are more mysterious, like a slender jade needle and a carved stone grinder. She explains that these implements belong to a centuries-old tradition known as Tra Dao, the way of tea. While Tra Dao is often associated with Japan or China, Vietnamese tea culture developed its own distinct practices and tools, influenced by but separate from its neighbors. A mainstream fact here, Vietnamese tea ceremonies have evolved over time, blending indigenous customs with elements borrowed from Chinese and Buddhist rituals. Each region has its own style, reflecting local tastes and beliefs. You're invited to try the jade needle, a delicate tool used to adjust tea leaves inside the pot without disturbing the water too much. Handling it feels like a secret handshake with history, a subtle connection across centuries. Your host smiles, noting that some tools were believed to have protective powers. For example, the jade needle was thought to ward off bad luck during ceremonies, while the stone grinder was used to prepare powdered tea for special occasions. Here's a quirky tidbit: in certain northern provinces, tea tools were passed down as family heirlooms, sometimes wrapped in silk and stored in bamboo cases decorated with poems. Losing these tools was considered bad omen, as if the family's connection to the spirit of tea had been severed. Historians still debate the exact origins of some Vietnamese tea implements, especially those unique to the Red River Delta region. Some believe they developed independently, while others argue for cross-cultural exchange with neighboring kingdoms. As the candle flickers lower, your host demonstrates the gentle grinding of tea leaves with the stone grinder. The sound is soft, almost hypnotic, a slow, rhythmic rubbing that fills the room with a fresh, earthy aroma. You're handed a cup of this freshly ground tea, brewed with water just below boiling. The taste is smooth and creamy, with a hint of grassiness and a touch of sweetness that lingers like a secret. To accompany this, she offers chatroi nuoc, a sweet dessert of glutinous rice balls filled with mung bean paste, swimming in a warm ginger syrup. The contrast between the creamy tea and the spicy sweet dessert feels like a conversation, each bite and sip enhancing the other. You savor the moment, noticing the textures, the chewiness of the rice balls, the warmth of the syrup, the delicate bitterness of the tea. The rain outside fades to a whisper, as if honoring your quiet reverence. Your host shares that these desserts were traditionally served during Tet, the Lunar New Year, symbolizing unity and sweetness in the year ahead. You imagine families gathered around fires, sharing stories and tea, as the rain patters gently outside. In this slow dance of tea, tools, and treats, you feel a deep sense of connection, not just to Vietnam, but to the timeless human ritual of finding comfort in small, deliberate acts. The night deepens further. And you are ready to rest. Outside, the rain has thinned to a fine drizzle, barely audible now, like the faintest hush of a whisper just beyond the windowpane. Inside, the tea house feels almost sacred. The air is rich with the mingled scents of steamed rice cakes, fresh tea, and faint traces of sandalwood incense. Your cup is refilled once again, this time with a tea from the Central Highlands, a robust brew made from leaves harvested at dawn on mist-covered slopes. The taste is bolder now, earthy and deep, like walking through a forest after rain. It settles warmly in your chest, slow and steady. This tea comes from the fertile soils of Dak Lak Province, a region known for its unique coffee culture but also for producing some of Vietnam's finest teas. Here, indigenous tribes like the Eat have cultivated tea for generations, blending their traditions with Vietnamese practices. Your host leans in, sharing stories of how tribal communities have long used tea not only for drinking but also in rituals to honor ancestors and mark seasonal changes. Each cup carries more than flavor, it carries history, identity, and respect. A mainstream fact, Vietnamese tea from the Central Highlands has gained recognition only recently on the international stage, partly because of these rich cultural traditions intertwined with its production. A quirky tidbit, some tribes believe that tea leaves gathered during specific lunar phases hold special powers to bring good dreams or calm restless spirits. Harvesting tea at the wrong time could, according to legend, invite misfortune or bad weather. Historians still argue whether these beliefs directly influenced agricultural calendars or were later romanticized by tea merchants seeking to add mystique to their products. Your host pours you a small cup of dark honey, mat ong rung, collected from wild bees in the surrounding forests. Its flavor is complex and floral, a perfect natural sweetener to accompany the strong mountain tea. Alongside the honey, she offers bonnet la gai, small glutinous rice cakes wrapped in ga leaves, giving them a distinctive herbal aroma and deep green color. These cakes are chewy with a subtle sweetness, traditionally eaten during festivals and family gatherings. The combination is rustic, grounding, and rich with layers of meaning. You notice how the bitterness of the tea softens under the honey's warmth, while the herbal notes of the cake complement the earthiness of the brew. As you savor this pairing, your host speaks softly about the changing face of Vietnamese tea culture. Modern agriculture and global demand have transformed many traditional practices, sometimes at the cost of local knowledge and biodiversity. Yet, she adds with a hopeful smile, the spirit of these ancient ceremonies remains alive, in the stories passed down, in the careful hands that pick leaves by dawn, and in quiet moments like this. You reflect on the rain outside, a gentle reminder that even in change, there is continuity. The land breathes, the leaves grow, and the tea steeps anew. And somewhere in the quiet folds of history and nature, you find a place to rest. The rain has almost ceased now, leaving only the soft patter of lingering droplets that seem to fall in slow motion. You feel the weight of the evening's calm settling over you as your host pours another cup, this time a blend known as tra sen, or lotus tea, a fragrant concoction where delicate tea leaves are infused with the scent of blooming lotus flowers. The aroma is intoxicating yet subtle, floral with a hint of sweetness that invites slow, mindful sipping. It's as if the essence of a quiet lakeside dawn has been captured in your cup. Lotus tea holds a special place in Vietnamese culture, especially in Hanoi, where vendors carefully layer fresh lotus petals around tea leaves to impart their unique fragrance. This tradition dates back centuries, offering a sensory bridge between nature's beauty and the ritual of tea. Here's a mainstream fact: lotus tea was often served to guests during important social occasions and was believed to promote calm and clarity of mind, perfect for rainy evenings like this. Your host tells a gentle story about a 19th-century poet who claimed that lotus tea could paint dreams on your tongue, a poetic way to describe its delicate flavor and soothing effect. The tea pairs wonderfully with bon com, a seasonal treat made from young green rice flakes pressed into sweet cakes. These cakes are soft, fragrant, and melt slowly, much like the rain outside. Quirky detail: in some parts of northern Vietnam, it was customary to offer lotus tea and bon com as a welcome gift to visitors during the autumn festival. The gift symbolized prosperity and renewal, akin to wishing someone good fortune wrapped in petals and sweetness. Historians still argue whether the lotus tea tradition began in imperial courts or among common folk, with some evidence pointing to monastic gardens as the earliest centers of its cultivation. Your host encourages you to breathe deeply as you sip, letting the floral notes and gentle sweetness wash over you. The candlelight flickers low, shadows dancing softly on the walls. You feel as if you're drifting through a quiet garden, where the only sound is the soft splash of rain against lotus leaves. The story deepens as she recounts how the lotus, Vietnam's national flower, has long symbolized purity and resilience, emerging pristine from muddy waters, much like these moments of peace emerging from life's storms. The rain slows further, and the night's stillness grows heavier, inviting you to sink into rest. You notice how the tea's floral fragrance seems to linger on your breath, like a whispered goodnight. As you take the last sip, the gentle sweetness of the bon com lingers, a tender promise of morning's quiet light. Your host dims the candle to a faint glow. And you, wrapped in the warmth of tea and story, begin to drift deeper into sleep. The rain has all but faded now, leaving behind the soft, steady drip of water falling from eaves and leaves, a gentle soundtrack to your slowing thoughts. Your host pours the final steep of the evening, a rare blend called Tran Gat, known for its subtle smokiness and smooth finish. This tea hails from the southern provinces, where the warm climate and rich soil create a very different flavor profile than the mountain teas you've sipped before. As you lift the cup, the scent of toasted wood and honeyed caramel rises, warm and inviting. The first sip is smooth, almost creamy, with a whisper of spice that unfolds slowly, like a story told just before sleep. Here's a mainstream fact: Tran Gat originated among the ethnic Khmer communities in the Mekong Delta and has been prized for its unique preparation method, which includes a slight roasting of the leaves before drying, a technique passed down through generations. Your host shares that this tea is often enjoyed with simple snacks like dried fruit or candied ginger, both of which balance the smoky undertones with a burst of sweetness or zing. You're offered a small plate of mut gung, candied ginger slices, spicy, chewy, and just sweet enough to tease the palate. The combination is comforting, a reminder that tea culture embraces both subtlety and contrast. A quirky tidbit: some southern villages believe that drinking Tran Gat with candied ginger during the rainy season can help ease the body's response to humidity and bring balance to one's energy. While the science is unclear, it's a tradition that has endured, blending practical wisdom with poetic belief. Historians still debate the extent to which ethnic minority practices influenced mainstream Vietnamese tea culture, but it's clear that these southern rituals have added rich layers to the nation's tea story. Your host leans back, watching you savor the tea and ginger, the room filled with quiet contentment. Outside, the rain has ceased altogether, leaving the world fresh and silent. As the final cup empties, you feel a gentle drowsiness envelop you, the warmth spreading from your hands through your chest. Your thoughts slow, like leaves drifting down a quiet stream. The night, the tea, the rain, all fold into a single, soothing moment. And you are ready to rest deeply, wrapped in the slow rhythms of history and ritual. The room feels cocooned and quiet now, the gentle pulse of the rain having faded into memory. You sit back, cradling the last warmth of your empty cup, the scent of tea leaves lingering softly in the air like a fading lullaby. As your host tidies away the tools and wraps up the evening story, you reflect on the journey you've shared, from misty mountain plantations to bustling village tea houses, from delicate lotus flowers to spicy candied ginger. Each sip, each bite, a quiet thread woven through centuries of Vietnamese life. Historians still ponder how tea culture became such a tender yet resilient part of Vietnam's identity, balancing influences from across Asia with unique local customs. What's clear is that these tea ceremonies are less about ceremony and more about connection, to land, to community, and to those simple moments where the world slows down. Before you finally drift into sleep, your host whispers a gentle reminder: the rituals of tea are an invitation to pause, to breathe, and to savor the small pleasures that might otherwise slip away unnoticed. The night outside is deep and still now, and the rain's soft memory wraps around you like a gentle shawl. You feel the warmth of the cup still in your hands, the taste of sweetness and earth lingering on your tongue. Now, as you let your eyelids grow heavy, imagine yourself in that quiet tea house, the soft glow of candlelight flickering, the faint rustle of bamboo leaves outside, and the comforting rhythm of a ritual that has carried peace to countless souls. Your breathing slows, the stories fade softly into dreams, and the world grows hushed. Sleep well, wrapped in history's gentle embrace. The rain's quiet song fades into the night, and so does your wakeful mind. With every breath, you sink deeper into calm. May the warmth of tea and the softness of stories carry you gently through the night. Good night.